The first thing Brandon said when he opened the door was, "Get back inside before the neighbors see you." He thought I was my sister. He thought the terrified woman standing on his porch was the same woman he had thrown out into a storm with 2 newborn babies. He thought he still held every card. He thought the fear he had spent years building around her would still work. What he did not know was that I had spent 20 years serving in the Navy SEAL teams. And what happened over the next few weeks would change every life connected to that house forever. My name is Rachel Donovan, and at the time this story happened, I was a Navy SEAL chief stationed near Hampton Roads, Virginia. I had spent most of my adult life solving problems in places most Americans only watched on the evening news. Desert heat, mountain snow, long deployments, half a world away from home. I thought I had seen the worst things human beings could do to one another. I was wrong. The night everything began, I was driving home from Virginia Beach during one of those cold coastal storms that felt determined to drag the whole state into the Atlantic. Rain slammed against my windshield. The wipers moved back and forth in a steady, tired rhythm. I was exhausted. I had just finished a difficult stretch of work, and all I wanted was a hot shower, a warm meal, and one full night of sleep. Instead, I stopped for gas. The station sat along a lonely stretch of highway about 40 minutes outside Virginia Beach. Most people were rushing inside to get away from the rain. That was when I saw her. At first, I thought I was staring into a mirror. My twin sister Hannah sat on a metal bench beneath the gas station overhang. She was soaked through. One of the babies was tucked inside her coat. The other rested against her shoulder beneath a damp blanket. Both infants could not have been more than a few weeks old. Hannah's hands were shaking. For a moment, I simply stood there. My brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. Then I hurried toward her. "Hannah." She looked up. The second she recognized me, tears filled her eyes. "Oh, Rachel." The way she said my name made my stomach tighten. I knelt beside her. "What happened?" she tried to answer. Instead, she started crying. Not loud crying, not dramatic crying, the quiet kind. The kind that comes after someone has already cried so hard there is nothing left but exhaustion. I carefully took one of the babies into my arms. The little girl felt freezing cold. My military training disappeared. In that moment, I was not a SEAL. I was not a chief. I was not the woman people called when situations were dangerous and complicated. I was simply an older sister. "Hannah," I said softly, "talk to me." She swallowed. "Brandon threw us out." I stared at her. "What?" he said. He was done pretending. My jaw tightened. "What does that mean?" Hannah looked down. I found messages. I already knew where this was going. "He's having an affair?" She nodded. "For months." The rain kept pounding against the roof above us. I listened as she told me everything. The lies, the secret credit cards, the late nights, the excuses. Then came the part that made my blood run cold. When she confronted him, he did not deny it. He laughed. Actually laughed. Then he told her she should be grateful he had stayed as long as he did. 3 days later, he changed the account passwords. 2 days after that, he moved money. And that afternoon, he threw her and the babies out. Just like that. No warning. No concern. No plan. A mother still recovering from childbirth and 2 newborn infants left standing in the rain. I looked down at my niece. The tiny girl yawned and squeezed my finger. Something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Something steadier. The same feeling I had learned to trust during dangerous missions. The feeling that arrives when a situation becomes unacceptable. "Where are you staying tonight?" I asked. Hannah laughed bitterly. "I don't know." That answer broke my heart. Nobody should ever have to say those words, especially not while holding newborn babies. I took a deep breath. You're not staying here. I don't want to be a burden. I almost smiled. Hannah had always worried about everyone except herself. You're my sister. I know. No, I said. You don't. Because if our positions were reversed, you'd already be dragging me into your car. For the first time all evening, she smiled. A small smile, but it was there. I helped her into my truck. The baby settled into the back seat. We drove through the storm. As she talked, I learned more. Brandon had become increasingly controlling over the last 2 years. He monitored spending, questioned every purchase, criticized everything. The affair had not been the beginning. It was simply the final chapter. About an hour later, I pulled into the driveway of an old friend from the military. Mark and his wife Carol had fostered children for years. Good people, reliable people, the kind of Americans who quietly make their communities stronger without asking for recognition. Without hesitation, they welcomed Hannah and the babies inside. Carol immediately started preparing the guest room. Mark carried supplies upstairs. Within minutes, Hannah was surrounded by warmth and kindness. I watched relief wash across her face. Then an idea appeared. At first, it sounded ridiculous. Then it sounded possible. Finally, it sounded necessary. Hannah and I had always looked nearly identical. Even as adults, strangers confused us. Brandon had never met me. Not once. He knew about me. He had seen pictures. But we had never stood in the same room. I slowly turned toward my sister. She stared back at me. The same realization had reached her. No, she whispered. Maybe, Rachel? What if he thinks you're coming back? Hannah's eyes widened. The room grew quiet. Mark looked between us. Carol stopped folding blankets. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Hannah shook her head. It's dangerous. Maybe it was. But another thought had already formed. For years, Brandon had controlled the situation. For years, Hannah had reacted. For once, I wanted him reacting. I wanted him believing everything was still under his control while we learned the truth, while we gathered facts, while my sister finally had room to breathe. I stood and grabbed Hannah's coat. Rachel? I looked at her. For the first time that night, I saw something besides fear in her eyes. Hope. Only a little. But enough. Outside, the storm continued tearing across Virginia. I slipped into her coat, picked up her phone, and headed for the door. For 20 years, I had faced dangerous men in difficult places. Tonight, I was driving towards something different. A man who believed kindness was weakness. A man who believed fear was power. A man who thought nobody would ever challenge him. He was about to make a very expensive mistake. I expected Brandon to be angry when I returned to the house. What I did not expect was how comfortable he seemed. Comfortable with cruelty. Comfortable with control. Comfortable with believing the woman standing in front of him had nowhere else to go. The moment he opened the door, his expression was not worried. It was irritated, as though I had interrupted his evening. Get inside, he snapped. Rain blew across the porch behind me. I lowered my head slightly, copying Hannah's posture. The twins and Hannah were safe. That thought gave me confidence. I stepped into the house. Brandon locked the door behind me. Then he walked past without even looking back. No apology. No concern. No questions. Just confidence. The house itself was exactly what you would expect from a middle-class Virginia suburb. 2-story colonial. Attached garage. Family photos on the walls. Children's toys stacked in corners. The appearance of a normal American family. But after 20 years of military service, I had learned something important. A clean house does not mean a healthy home. Sometimes the most dangerous situations are hidden behind ordinary front doors. Brandon dropped onto the couch. The television blared with a football game. He pointed toward the kitchen. "There's leftover casserole." I stared at him. "That's all you have to say?" His eyes narrowed. For a moment, I worried I had pushed too far. Then he laughed. "You're not seriously expecting me to apologize?" I lowered my gaze again. "No." "Good." He turned his attention back to the television. The conversation was over. At least for him. I quietly moved through the house. Every room told a story. Hannah's story. The nursery had been arranged with care. Framed baby photos. Handmade blankets. A rocking chair. Yet something felt wrong. There were almost no pictures of Hannah. Plenty of Brandon. Plenty of Brandon's parents. Plenty of vacations. But very few of the woman who actually lived there. At first glance, it seemed insignificant. But it was not. Abusive people often rewrite reality. They slowly erase the importance of everyone else. I saw evidence of that everywhere. The next morning, Brandon revealed even more. I made coffee. He walked into the kitchen. "Did you call your mother?" "No." "Good." I looked up. "Why?" "Because she'll just start taking your side." I nearly laughed. My side? Hannah had been thrown into a storm with newborn babies. Yet somehow, Brandon saw himself as the victim. He sat down, opened his laptop, and spent nearly 20 minutes complaining about Hannah, about money, about responsibilities, about how difficult his life had become. The entire time, he never once mentioned the twins. Not once. As if his own children barely existed. I listened quietly. The less I spoke, the more he talked. That had always been true of arrogant people. Silence makes them reveal themselves. By afternoon, I had learned something else. Brandon loved hearing himself talk, especially when he believed he was winning. Over the next several days, I settled into a routine. I acted nervous, quiet, submissive, everything he expected Hannah to be. Meanwhile, I watched. I listened. I recorded. Every conversation went into a secure app on my phone. Nothing illegal. Virginia law allowed one-party consent recordings. Years in the military had taught me the value of documentation. Facts matter. Evidence matters. Memories can be challenged. Recordings cannot. The more Brandon relaxed, the more reckless he became. One evening, he sat at the dining room table, drinking beer. "You know why this happened?" I looked down. "No, because you stopped appreciating me." I almost rolled my eyes. Instead, I remained silent. He continued. "I work hard." Another sip. "I deserve happiness." Another sip. "Besides, Lauren actually respects me." Lauren. The affair partner. Interesting. Brandon had never used her name before. Now, he could not stop talking about her. For nearly 30 minutes, he praised another woman while believing he was speaking to his wife. The level of selfishness was astonishing. But useful, very useful. 3 days later, I got my first real break. Brandon left for work and forgot his home office door was unlocked. Inside, I found stacks of financial paperwork. Nothing dramatic at first. Mortgage statements, tax returns, utility bills. Then I noticed something strange. Several bank statements were missing. Only certain months remained. I took photographs. Then more photographs. Then more. Military training again. Observe everything. Assume nothing. By lunchtime, I had copied dozens of documents. That evening, I sent them securely to a retired military attorney I had known for years. His reply arrived shortly after midnight. "Call me tomorrow. We may have a problem." The next morning, another surprise arrived. Brandon's mother, Patricia. She appeared at the front door carrying a casserole dish. The moment she saw me, she frowned. Not because she suspected I was not Hannah, because she knew something was wrong. "May I come in?" "Of course." We sat at the kitchen table. Patricia was 72, sharp-eyed and kind-faced, the sort of woman who remembered birthdays and mailed handwritten cards. After several minutes, she quietly reached across the table. "Sweetheart," I looked up. "Yes? How bad is it?" The question stunned me. She already knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. "What do you mean?" Patricia sighed. Brandon wasn't raised this way. The sadness in her voice felt genuine. I don't know where I failed. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she surprised me again. "If he hurt you, you don't have to protect him." My heart softened. Many parents defend their children no matter what. Patricia was not doing that. She looked heartbroken, not blind. That conversation lasted nearly 2 hours. Carefully, I listened. She revealed years of troubling behavior, small lies, manipulation, entitlement. Nothing criminal by itself, but together it painted a clear picture. Brandon's behavior had not appeared overnight. It had grown slowly over time, like rust quietly spreading until the damage became impossible to ignore. After Patricia left, I sat alone in the kitchen. The pieces were beginning to fit together. This was not simply a cheating husband. This was not merely a failed marriage. This was a man who had spent years convincing a good woman she had no value. A man who believed fear was a useful tool. A man who counted on silence. That evening, another piece fell into place. A neighbor named Eddie stopped by. Retired electrician, Vietnam veteran, good man. While Brandon was inside taking a call, Eddie quietly spoke to me. "You all right?" I nodded. He did not believe me. His eyes lingered. Then he said something important. "If you ever need a witness, I've seen more than people realize." My pulse quickened. A witness. Interesting. Very interesting. After he left, I wrote everything down. Every detail. Every observation. Every name. The circle was growing. Allies. Witnesses. Documents. Evidence. And Brandon still believed he was in complete control. Late that night, he sat across from me in the living room. His feet rested on the coffee table. The television glowed softly. Without warning, he smirked. "You know what's funny?" I looked up. "What?" He laughed, a cold laugh, the kind that made my skin crawl. "Nobody would believe you anyway." Then he returned his attention to the television. As if he had said nothing important. As if he had merely commented on the weather, I stared at him. And in that moment, something became crystal clear. This was not about revenge anymore. This was about accountability. For years, he had relied on fear. For years, he had counted on nobody paying attention. That was over. Because for the first time in his life, someone was. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Old habits. 20 years in the Navy had trained my body to rise early, whether I wanted to or not. The house was quiet. For a few moments, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and reviewed everything I had gathered so far. The recordings, the photographs, the financial documents, Patricia's observations, Eddie's offer to serve as a witness. Individually, none of it would bring Brandon down. Together, it painted a picture. And the picture was ugly. At 7:30, my phone vibrated. A text message from Hannah. The twins slept 4 hours straight. First time since they were born. "Thank you." I smiled. Then another message arrived. "Carol made pancakes. I think we're okay." That one hit me harder. "We're okay." Such simple words. Yet they reminded me why I was doing this. Not for revenge. Not for satisfaction. For safety. For dignity. For a woman who had spent years forgetting she deserved both. A few minutes later, I stepped outside and called the retired military attorney who had reviewed the financial documents. His name was Michael Sloan, former Navy JAG, Smart, patient, the kind of lawyer who never raised his voice because he never needed to. He answered on the second ring. "Morning, Chief. Morning. You were right to call." My stomach tightened. "What did you find?" A brief pause. "Enough to concern me." I listened carefully. Several account transfers appeared unusual. Large sums had been moved between accounts shortly before Hannah was thrown out. Nothing automatically illegal, but definitely suspicious. Then came something more troubling. "It looks like some signatures may not match." I sat straighter. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I wouldn't be surprised if additional documents exist." My military instincts immediately activated. Missing information, hidden assets, unanswered questions. All signs pointed toward a larger problem. Michael continued, "If this goes where I think it's going, you'll need documentation. Every piece you can find. Already working on it. I figured you would." After the call ended, I began planning. The difference between chaos and success often comes down to preparation. That lesson had kept people alive during deployments. It worked just as well in civilian life. Over the next week, I became a student of Brandon's routines. What time he left, what time he returned, where he kept paperwork, which passwords he reused, how often he checked the mail. Every detail mattered. Meanwhile, Brandon became increasingly comfortable. One evening, he came home carrying expensive takeout. Steak, seafood, a bottle of wine. He dropped the bags onto the counter. "Lauren recommended this place." There was that name again. Lauren, the woman helping destroy his marriage. I kept my expression neutral. "You seem serious about her," he laughed. "Of course I am." Then he said something astonishing. "I should have left years ago. I almost forgot to remain in character." Years ago, Hannah had supported him through layoffs, medical issues, financial struggles. Years ago, she had worked 2 jobs while he finished a certification program. Yet somehow, he had rewritten history. People like Brandon often do. They create stories where they are always the hero. Everyone else becomes disposable. The following Friday, another opportunity arrived. Brandon left town overnight for what he claimed was a business conference. The moment his car disappeared, I went to work. His home office yielded more records. Tax files, insurance papers, loan applications. Then I found a locked drawer. Not unusual, but interesting. Inside the desk, taped beneath a shelf, sat a spare key. Predictable. Very predictable. I unlocked the drawer. My pulse quickened. There they were. Additional bank statements, investment records, property documents, and something else? A folder labeled family. I opened it. Immediately, I saw Hannah's name. Several pages later, my heart sank. Loan applications, credit accounts, documents carrying signatures that looked similar to Hannah's, but not identical. I photographed every page, every signature, every account number. By the time I finished, I had hundreds of images. That evening, I forwarded everything securely to Michael. His response arrived less than an hour later. "Call me now." That was not encouraging. When I reached him, he got straight to the point. "If these signatures are forged, Brandon has serious problems." "How serious?" "Potentially life-changing." I leaned back in my chair. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Michael asked a question. "How much does your sister know?" "Almost nothing." "Then prepare her carefully." I knew exactly what he meant. Victims often discover abuse in layers. The full truth can be overwhelming. After ending the call, I drove to visit Hannah. The twins were sleeping when I arrived. Mark and Carol welcomed me inside. The atmosphere felt completely different from Brandon's house. Warm, peaceful, safe. Hannah looked better. Still exhausted, still healing, but stronger. We sat together on the back porch while the babies napped inside. For a while, we simply watched the evening sky. Then she spoke. I forgot what quiet feels like. That sentence broke my heart. Nobody should forget something so basic. I reached over and squeezed her hand. You deserve this. She shook her head. No. Yes. Tears filled her eyes. Brandon always said I was lucky he stayed. I felt anger rise inside me. Not explosive anger. The controlled kind. The kind that waits. Hannah, she looked at me. Do you believe that? A long silence followed. Finally, she whispered, No. It was the first time she had said it aloud. The first crack in the wall he had built around her confidence. And once cracks appear, walls eventually fall. When I returned to Brandon's house that night, another surprise awaited me. A detective from Chesapeake whom I trusted had reviewed some public records I had asked him to examine. Nothing official. Nothing improper. Just publicly available information. The results were eye-opening. Brandon's financial situation was not nearly as strong as he had claimed. In fact, several debts appeared hidden. Substantial debts. Suddenly, his behavior made even more sense. The affair, the money transfers, the secret accounts, the panic. He was not just selfish. He was desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. Over the next few days, those mistakes multiplied. Brandon began signing paperwork without reading carefully. He moved money, made phone calls, sent emails. Each action created a trail that investigators, attorneys, and eventually a judge could follow. By the end of the week, the picture was becoming clear. For years, Brandon had operated under one assumption. Nobody was paying attention. Nobody was checking. Nobody was keeping score. He was wrong, and he still had no idea how wrong. The collapse started on a Tuesday morning. Not with handcuffs. Not with sirens. Not with some dramatic scene from a crime show. It started with a letter. One simple letter sitting on the kitchen counter. I was pouring coffee when Brandon walked into the room. He looked tired. For the first time since I had met him, he actually looked worried. His eyes landed on the envelope. He frowned. What's this? I shrugged. It came yesterday. He grabbed it. The moment he saw the return address, the color drained from his face. Interesting. Very interesting. For several seconds, he simply stared. Then he opened it. I watched carefully. Years of military service had taught me how to read people. Tiny movements, facial tension, changes in breathing. Brandon's reaction told me everything. Whatever was in that letter scared him. He quickly folded the paper and shoved it into his pocket. What is it? I asked quietly. Nothing. A lie. An obvious one. He grabbed his keys. I'm going to the office. Then he left without touching his coffee. The front door slammed behind him. I waited 30 seconds. Then I smiled. The pressure had begun. Over the next several days, more letters arrived. Questions from financial institutions. Requests for clarification. Formal notices. Nothing catastrophic by itself, but together they created a problem. Because every lie requires maintenance. And Brandon had been lying for years. The larger the lie, the harder it becomes to protect. By Friday evening, his confidence had noticeably changed. The arrogant man who once lounged comfortably on the couch now paced through the house, checking emails, making calls, drinking more than usual. One night, I overheard him arguing with Lauren. The conversation happened in the backyard. He thought nobody could hear. Unfortunately for him, military training had given me excellent hearing. I told you I'd handle it. A pause. Then, louder. No, that's not what's happening. Another pause. His voice sharpened. Because people are asking questions, silence followed. Then came the sentence that told me everything. If you leave now after everything I've done for you, the call ended shortly afterward. Brandon walked back inside looking furious. Lauren was pulling away. When trouble arrived, loyalty suddenly became less attractive. I was not surprised. Affairs often survive on fantasy. Reality tends to ruin them. The following Monday brought another development. Michael called. Good news. I sat straighter. Let's hear it. The financial investigator finished his review. That got my attention. And several transactions appear intentionally concealed. I leaned back. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Months earlier, I might have celebrated. Instead, I felt something different. Sadness. Because every discovery revealed another choice Brandon had made. Another opportunity he had to do the right thing. Another moment when he had chosen himself. How strong is the case? I asked. Michael answered carefully. Strong enough that I'd hate to be sitting in Brandon's chair. I thanked him and ended the call. Then I looked out the kitchen window. The spring weather was finally arriving in Virginia. The storm that had started this story felt far away. Yet the damage it revealed was still unfolding. That afternoon, I visited Hannah. The twins were awake, healthy, alert, beautiful. One baby gripped my finger. The other stared at me with serious blue eyes. Hannah laughed softly. She always looks like she's judging people. Smart kid. For the first time in weeks, we shared a genuine laugh. Then Hannah grew quiet. Do you think he'll ever understand what he did? I considered the question carefully. Older people understand something younger people often miss. Consequences do not automatically create wisdom. Sometimes people learn. Sometimes they do not. I don't know, I admitted. But he's running out of excuses. Hannah nodded. That seemed enough. As I prepared to leave, she stopped me. Rachel, I turned. Yeah? Her eyes filled with emotion. You gave me time to breathe. The words stayed with me all day. Not revenge. Not victory. Time to breathe. Sometimes that is what people need most. A chance to remember who they are. When I returned to Brandon's house that evening, I found him sitting alone in darkness. No television. No music. No phone. Just silence. The sight surprised me. For the first time, he looked small. Not physically, emotionally. Like a man beginning to understand the walls were closing in. He looked up. Do you think I'm a bad person? The question caught me off guard. I studied him. Part of me wanted to answer honestly. Another part remembered the role I was playing. I don't know. He laughed bitterly. Neither do I. For a moment, I glimpsed something human beneath the arrogance. Regret, perhaps. Or fear. Maybe both. Then the moment passed. The next day, everything accelerated. A formal legal filing arrived. Additional financial reviews followed. Questions multiplied. Deadlines appeared. Suddenly, Brandon spent his evenings buried in paperwork. The confident smile vanished. So did the constant criticism. Fear had replaced it. One afternoon, Patricia stopped by again. She sat quietly at the kitchen table. After a long silence, she spoke. I know something is happening. I nodded. I figured. She folded her hands. When this is over, please remember, he's still my son. The request struck me deeply because she was not asking me to excuse him. She was not denying reality. She simply loved her child. Even when he disappointed her, especially when he disappointed her. That kind of love is difficult. Many older Americans understand that. Family is not always easy. Sometimes family breaks your heart. I reached across the table. I understand. Tears filled her eyes. Thank you. The following week delivered the final blow. Hannah arrived. Not alone. With Michael. with documentation, with evidence, with confidence. Brandon was standing in the living room when she walked through the front door. For several seconds, he simply stared. Then he looked at me, then back at Hannah, then back at me again. Confusion spread across his face. His breathing changed. The realization hit him all at once. Two women, identical faces, standing side by side. His mouth opened. No words came out. Hannah stood taller than I had seen her stand in years. She was not trembling anymore. She was not apologizing. She was not afraid. "Hello, Brandon." The room became completely silent. His eyes moved toward me. "What is this?" I calmly stepped forward. "My name is Rachel." The color disappeared from his face. For the first time since I had met him, Brandon looked genuinely terrified. And deep down, I knew something important. The man who had spent years controlling everyone around him had finally lost control of the story. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence in that living room felt heavier than any argument. Brandon stood frozen between Hannah and me, trying to process what he was seeing. Two identical women. One he had spent years controlling. The other had spent 20 years hunting down problems and refusing to back away from difficult situations. His eyes shifted from Hannah to me again. Then he pointed. "You," his voice cracked. "You've been here this whole time." I nodded. "Yes." The room fell silent again. I expected anger. I expected shouting. Instead, I saw fear. Real fear. Not the kind Brandon had spent years creating in others. The kind that comes when someone realizes their choices have finally caught up with them. Michael calmly placed a folder on the coffee table. "Mr. Reed, I suggest you review these documents." Brandon did not move. "What documents?" "Evidence." The word landed like a hammer. Hannah stood beside me, strong and steady, nothing like the frightened woman I had found at the gas station. Brandon looked at her, then down at the folder, then back at her. For the first time, he seemed to understand something. Hannah was not alone anymore. She never should have been. But she was not now. Slowly, he opened the folder. The color drained from his face page by page. Financial records, account transfers, property documents, credit applications, copies of signatures, witness statements. The recordings did not even need to be mentioned yet. The paperwork alone was devastating. "Brandon," Michael said calmly, "this situation can still be handled professionally if you cooperate." Brandon slammed the folder shut. "This is ridiculous." A familiar response. Denial. People often cling to it when reality becomes uncomfortable. Hannah spoke softly. "Is it?" Brandon looked at her. His expression hardened. For one brief moment, I saw the old version of him. The controlling version. The one who used intimidation as a tool. Then he noticed Michael. Then me. Then the folder. The confidence vanished. Because intimidation only works when people are afraid. And nobody in that room was afraid anymore. Over the next several weeks, the legal process moved forward. There were meetings, financial reviews, mediation sessions, lawyers, paperwork, long conversations. The dramatic revenge people imagine rarely happens in real life. Real accountability arrives slowly, one document at a time, one decision at a time. One consequence at a time. And sometimes that hurts more. Lauren disappeared almost immediately. Apparently, her interest in Brandon had been closely connected to the version of himself he had presented. Successful, stable, confident. Once that image cracked, she vanished. I was not surprised. Neither was Hannah. One evening, she called me. The twins were asleep. I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, but I also heard something else. "Peace." Lauren left him. I nodded. I heard. A long pause followed. Then Hannah surprised me. I don't even feel happy about it. I understood exactly what she meant. At a certain point, revenge stops feeling satisfying. Mostly because healthy people eventually stop wanting revenge. They want healing. How are the babies? I asked. The smile returned to her voice. Growing too fast. That answer made me laugh. Every parent says that. Every grandparent says it too. The weeks continued passing. Hannah secured a small rental home near Mark and Carol. Nothing fancy, just a comfortable place where she could start over. I helped move furniture. Eddie helped install shelves. Church friends delivered meals. Neighbors donated baby clothes. Watching people come together reminded me of something I had always loved about America. Most communities still contain good people. You do not always notice them until life becomes difficult. Then suddenly, they are everywhere. Helping, carrying boxes, dropping off casseroles, checking in, showing up. Meanwhile, Brandon's world kept shrinking. His debts became impossible to hide. His financial problems surfaced. His professional reputation suffered. Nothing catastrophic, nothing that destroyed his life, but enough to force him to confront reality. One afternoon, I encountered Patricia outside the courthouse. She looked older than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally, like someone carrying a weight she could not put down. We sat together on a bench. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, she sighed. I keep wondering where I went wrong. I looked at her. You didn't create every choice he made. Tears appeared in her eyes. He's still my little boy. There it was. The truth every parent understands. Children grow older, but they never stop being your children. Even when they disappoint you. Even when they break your heart. I gently squeezed her hand. That doesn't mean you approve of what he did. She nodded slowly, painfully, but she nodded. The mediation sessions eventually reached their conclusion. Hannah received financial protections. Custody arrangements were established. The twins' future became secure. Most importantly, Hannah regained control of her own life. Then something unexpected happened. During the final meeting, Brandon broke. Not emotionally at first. Physically, his shoulders sagged. His voice softened. His confidence disappeared. For months, he had fought every accusation, every document, every consequence. Now, he simply looked tired. Very tired. Finally, he turned toward Hannah. The room became silent. Even the attorneys stopped talking. Brandon swallowed hard. Then he spoke. I'm sorry. Nobody responded. Not immediately. Because real apologies are not measured by words. They are measured by truth. Several seconds passed. Then he continued. I blamed everyone except myself. His voice shook. I blamed you. Another pause. I blamed work. Another pause. I blamed stress. He looked down. But it was me. The room remained silent. No dramatic music. No sudden forgiveness. Just honesty. Perhaps for the first time in years, Hannah listened carefully. Then she surprised everyone, including me. I'm not ready to forgive you, Brandon nodded slowly. I understand. But I'm also tired of carrying anger. That sentence changed everything. Because forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. Hannah was not excusing his behavior. She was not pretending it had never happened. She was simply refusing to let bitterness control the rest of her life. The meeting ended shortly afterward. As we walked toward the parking lot, she slipped her arm through mine. The afternoon sun warmed the pavement. For the first time since the storm, I felt something loosen inside me. The fight was ending. The healing could finally begin. 6 months later, I found myself sitting in a folding chair beneath a shade tree, holding one of my nieces, while the other slept peacefully in a stroller nearby. The storm was gone. Not just the weather. the entire season of chaos. The fear, the uncertainty, the endless phone calls, the legal meetings, the sleepless nights. All of it felt distant now, not forgotten, but finally behind us. A gentle spring breeze moved across the backyard. Children laughed somewhere down the street. A lawnmower hummed in the distance. The smell of barbecue drifted through the neighborhood. It was one of those ordinary American afternoons people rarely appreciate until life reminds them how precious ordinary can be. I looked around the yard. Friends filled folding chairs. Neighbors chatted near the grill. Mark stood proudly flipping burgers. Carol carried lemonade to a table covered with desserts. Eddie was telling one of his Vietnam stories to anyone willing to listen. Nobody seemed to mind hearing it for the 10th time. In fact, several people were laughing. It felt like family. The kind of family you are not always born into. The kind that is built. Hannah stepped onto the back porch, carrying a bowl of potato salad. She looked completely different from the woman I had found at the gas station. Not physically, emotionally. Her shoulders were straighter. Her smile came easier. The constant tension had disappeared from her face. Healing had not happened overnight. There had been difficult days, lonely days, days when the twins cried non-stop, days when bills arrived, days when memories hurt. But she had kept moving forward, one step at a time, and eventually those steps added up, just like they always do. She caught me watching her and smiled. "What?" I laughed. "Nothing. You're doing it again." "Doing what?" "Looking at me like you're evaluating a mission." That made me laugh harder. Maybe she was right. 20 years in the Navy had given me certain habits. Hannah sat beside me. For a few moments, we watched the twins. Then she quietly said something that surprised me. "I don't think I ever thanked you properly." I shook my head. "You don't need to." "Yes, I do." Her voice became serious. "When you found me that night, I was broken. I immediately started to disagree." She stopped me. "No," her eyes met mine. "Let me finish." So I did. She looked across the yard. I truly believed everything he said about me. That admission hurt to hear. But it was important. Because emotional abuse rarely begins with cruelty. It begins with doubt, then insecurity, then isolation. Until eventually, the victim starts repeating the lies themselves. Hannah continued, "I thought I was weak." "You weren't." "I know that now." She smiled softly. "But I didn't then." A long silence followed. The kind that exists between people who do not need to fill every moment with conversation. Finally, she looked at me. "You didn't save me because you're a Navy SEAL." I felt my throat tighten. "You saved me because you're my sister." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she leaned her head against my shoulder, just like she used to when we were kids. And suddenly, I was not a warrior. I was not a chief. I was not the woman who had spent 2 decades serving her country. I was simply a sister. And honestly, that felt more important. As the afternoon continued, another guest arrived. The conversations gradually quieted. Not completely, just enough for people to notice. Brandon had entered the yard. He looked different too. Older somehow. Humbler. Life has a way of doing that, especially when someone spends months confronting consequences they never expected. Nobody rushed to greet him. Nobody applauded. Nobody treated him like a hero. But nobody chased him away either. He quietly walked toward the picnic tables, then stopped. Unsure. Almost uncomfortable. Hannah saw him. Their eyes met. For a moment, I wondered what would happen. Then Hannah did something remarkable. She walked over and spoke to him. Not warmly, not coldly, simply respectfully. 2 adults, 2 parents, trying to build something healthier than what existed before. The conversation lasted only a few minutes. When it ended, Brandon stepped back. He nodded. Then he moved toward a different group of guests. Nothing dramatic. No movie ending. No magical reconciliation. Just progress. Small progress. And sometimes that is enough. Later that evening, as the sun began setting, I sat alone near the fence line. The twins were asleep. The party was winding down. The backyard glowed with golden light. I found myself thinking about that stormy night again. The gas station. The cold rain. Hannah's frightened face. The babies wrapped in blankets. At the time, everything had felt hopeless, as if the future had been stolen. But life is strange. Sometimes the worst night of your life becomes the beginning of something better. Not because suffering is good. It is not. But because difficult moments reveal things. Strength, character, loyalty, love. The people who truly show up when it matters. I learned that lesson many times in the military. And I saw it again here at home. The storm had revealed who Brandon was. But it had also revealed who everyone else was. Mark, Carol, Eddie, Patricia, the church community, the neighbors, Hannah herself. People willing to help. People willing to stand beside someone who felt alone. People willing to remind another human being that they mattered. As darkness settled over the neighborhood, I looked toward the house one last time. Hannah stood on the porch, holding one of the twins. She was laughing, really laughing, the kind of laugh that comes from peace. And in that moment, I realized something. That night, we switched places. But what truly changed was not who Brandon saw. It was who my sister finally saw when she looked in the mirror. A woman worth loving. A woman worth protecting. A woman who never needed anyone's permission to believe in herself. And maybe that is the lesson I hope people carry away from this story. No matter your age, no matter your mistakes, no matter how long someone has tried to convince you otherwise, your value does not belong to another person. It belongs to you. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to think about someone who may need encouragement today. Share this story with a friend or family member who believes they are facing their struggles alone. And if you would like to hear more stories about courage, family, resilience, and second chances, I would be honored if you joined us again. Thank you for spending this time with me.